The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. We're just a little bit ahead of the game this morning, and I love that. We're better to be early than late, right? That's what my mother always said. And when you're on time, you're late. That was the thing she said. I'm not so good at that. But thank you for joining us. We're live right now. It is Monday, January 27th. I am Shannon Penrod. I identify as a very proud pony. For those of you who don't know, that's a parent of a neurodiverse individual. Those are the words that my son has given me to describe my relationship to this community and his diagnosis. So I'm so excited to be here with you guys because we're continuing in our 2025 push for positivity. In the face of everything, we're going to stay positive, right? So today we're going to be talking about how to create a positive, collaborative relationship with your child's school. You know that I talk a lot with you guys about how to go into an IEP, what to ask for, what to push for, to advocate for your child. And I'm a very big fan of saying that you need to advocate for your child. But occasionally I will hear from somebody who works in a school who says, you make it sound very adversarial, Shannon, and you don't need to make it sound so adversarial. So today we're going to focus on how do we positively build the relationship, because I've been the beneficiary of this. And I've seen whole communities be the beneficiary of this. So this is what we're going to talk about in just a second. But before we get there, I want to mention to you again that we're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and about a dozen other sites. Our fabulous Chris Desmond is going to show you some of the different ways that you can connect with us while I talk about it a little bit. We have a YouTube channel that is very robust and we have over 14 years of content that's there for you, that's free on YouTube if you want to watch and listen at the same time. Sometimes that's fun. We do create little PowerPoints and we show you stuff on the screen, and you can always make fun of my hair. I know my hair has been through some changes in the last 14 years, and I have crazy hair. Let's just admit it. Let's face it head on. I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I have lots of problems with it, but I don't have a problem with being. There was at a conference about, 3 years ago. It was after COVID. I was at a conference and somebody came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to meet you in person. I've been watching your videos since I was a student. It was great because the teacher, had us watch your jargon videos and it was so informative. And of course, we all get excited about it because it was the whole thing about your hair." And then they kind of froze. And I was like, what, I'm sorry, what about my hair? And they were like, "Oh, I think I hear my mother calling me." And they wanted to get out of the conversation, but I wheedled it out of them that the part of how the professor got them to write about the things that we were talking about in the jargon was they had to describe my crazy hair. And because my hair is crazy it's crazy today. And I thought, I could be offended by that, but my hair is crazy. And if that helped those students to have a way and the teacher to have a way to know that they watched it, it's all good. My hair served a purpose. So there we go. We're accepting as much as we can and being positive as much as we can, right? I said last week, it's the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can. I've tried to change my hair and sometimes it's successful and sometimes not. So I'm accepting that sometimes it's not. A whole lot of other things I'm accepting too. So we're going to talk about that. But back to most of you are listening to us on podcasts. That's where the majority of our audience is. That's wonderful. We hope that we are robust enough in the language to share with you the things visually that are happening on the screen as well. We hope that you enjoy that. Now, when you listen in podcast, it is a free download, and that's wonderful. And I'm very proud that it has been free all along. It's not a membership. We're not asking for a donation. It's free. It does mean that you're going to get ads. And I hope that you embrace that. Every time that you hear the ad pop up, I hope you go, woohoo, I didn't have to pay for this because they paid for it. If that doesn't make you go woohoo and you're in the middle of something and it's frustrating for you, there is a way that you can pay for an ad-free version. It's $5 a month. You can subscribe. You can go to glow.fm/autism-live, $5 a month, and you get it ad-free. Not only do you get Autism Live, but you get Ask Dr. Doreen and literally everything that we do at the Autism Network. You don't even have to set a timer. If you subscribe on Glow and pay that $5 a month, every time we do a new show, it will automatically be in your inbox, and all you have to do is click it, and you're there ad-free. So that's available to you. But we really take great pride in being able to offer it to everyone for free. Also, you just listen and appreciate the ads. That's all that we ask of you. I'm trying to think if there's anything else on my agenda. I do want to say that a lot of you have been writing to us in fear, that you're concerned about what may happen with the Department of Education. I want you to know that we are keeping our eyes very firmly on that, and we will let you know when we feel that there is something. There was a lot of concern over the weekend that the White House official pages, government pages, the disabilities page is no longer there. We are waiting to see and hear a statement about, is that because it's being renovated, or is it gone? At this point in time, we don't know. But I guarantee you, when we know anything, we will share it with you, and we will take positive steps to be able to circumvent, to advocate for the people that we love on the spectrum. That's what we're about here on Autism Live. And that's what we're going to hold true to. You know that we always say that everything we do with the show here is to provide information and inspiration, and that is meant for that larger autism community that starts with individuals who are themselves on the spectrum, but includes absolutely everyone who loves them, because we want to be good allies always, right? To make sure that we are fighting for the rights of individuals who are on the spectrum. So we will continue to do that, and we will continue to keep you informed when there is something to inform you about. All right. Is that a deal? That's a deal. Okay. So feel free to be writing in. Now for this one, I know last week I didn't want to do the hurried version through. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and do that, Chris. I'm going to go through the 10, and then I'm going to go back and expound on each one of them. But I think it's worthwhile for those of you who are in a hurry. So these are the 10 tips to create a positive, collaborative relationship with your child's school. This is, by the way, this is regardless of if your child has an IEP, a 504, or, your kiddo who's neurotypical. You want to build that positive collaborative relationship. But I have to say, if your child has an IEP or a 504 or needs either of those, this stuff is no longer optional. It's critical. It's critical that you do these, I think, as many of these as you can possibly do to create that relationship so that you're working together, not constantly butting heads, because you're going to butt heads sometimes. Just saying. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's go through them really quickly. Number 1, attend PTA meetings. And I'll tell you later why that is absolutely critical. Number 2, you are going to volunteer at your child's school. And there are lots of things to talk about there, but it's super important that you volunteer at some point. Number 3, you are going to ask and then donate to your child's classroom, but ask them what they need first. Donating things they don't need, not helpful. Number 4, ask how the teacher would like to communicate with you. I know you have a preference, but let's find out what their preference is. Number 5, we're going to communicate our expectations. All right, it gets a little sticky there. We're going to talk about this in a minute, but it's absolutely key. If you don't tell somebody what you need and what you expect, you're very unlikely to get it. Just saying. Number 6, we're going to offer successful strategies for the child's classroom. Now, I put a little, extra thing there when asked with a question mark, because some people are dicey. We'll talk more about this in a second. Number 7, we're going to share resources. And that may not always be when asked, but we'll talk about how and when to do this. Number 8, we're going to ask how we can best support. Never hurts to ask, right? And if they're communicating clearly, then maybe we can hit it out of the park. I don't know, maybe not. Number 9, we're going to praise anything good. just like we do with our kids, right? Somebody does something at school and it's good, we're going to double down on the praise. I'm telling you, it works like a charm. Number 10, finally, we're going to write thank you notes and recommendation letters. I have seen this move the dial more than anything else. I would love to take credit for this and say this is me, all me, but somebody suggested this. And I got to say, it was one of the most effective things that I ever did to create a positive relationship with school. So we'll talk more about that. Let's go back to number 1 and let's talk about PTA meetings. Now, not all schools have a PTA meeting, but there is some sort of a parent organization at every school. If it's not, because PTA is an official organization and there's dues and all that. So it may be that at your school you don't have actual PTA, but if you do, either way, attend. Now, why? Well, even if your child is at a school that's super small, it's very hard for the staff to get to know every single kid. Think about that for just a second. That, for a teacher, let's hope that the class size is 20, but sometimes it's 45 kids. That's a lot of kids to get to know. The teacher's going to get to know them during the school year, but at what rate? And then, you have all the additional staff, the vice principal, the principal, the ladies that work behind the counter, right? It's really a lot for them to get to know the entire student body. And it's going to be critical for you that people know who your child is and that they associate your child with good things. Because occasionally you're going to come in and you're going to push them a little bit and you're going to ask them for things, right? So you want as much good, think of it like stink. You want as much good stink on your child as you possibly can. When you attend the PTA meeting, first of all, it'll tell you a lot about the school. If you go into the PTA meeting and they've got this many chairs set up for parents, then, that's pretty exciting. And if that many chairs get filled, we're showing a picture for those of you listening in podcasts of empty chairs. If that many chairs get filled, that's pretty exciting too. It means that there is a robust set of parents that are very, very involved. That's great because it means that there's going to be more programs and more things that are happening for those kiddos. I'll tell you something, because I worked in the public school system. You get a certain amount of money and you spend it the way that you have to spend it and you do the absolute best you can. But it's supercharged when you have families in the community who are participating as well. It really is amazing how much more can get done when you have a group of parent volunteers. So you want to be a part of that. You want to I would sit in the front row and be seen. Because if nothing else, if you do nothing for the PTA all year long, which I'm not going to advocate that you do, but if you do absolutely nothing but just go to the PTA meeting, people will notice. People will notice. They'll make a point of saying, and who are you? And who is your child? And if you're there every time, it will be noticed and it will put positive stink on your child. It absolutely will. It's just an equation that works every single time. Now, I would say to you, it's very hard to sit there. I don't know, maybe you're different than I am, but it's very hard to sit there and not get involved in something because you're going to have an opinion on something. And it could be as simple as, what snack to give kids while they're doing field day, but you're going to find that you have an opinion about something. And then when you speak up, it is very likely that they will ask you to be on a committee or run a committee. There's where it gets a little bit dicey. I want to encourage you, don't take on more than you can handle and be honest about it. These are other parents who have kids and, they're figuring it out too. And you can have no compunction about saying, I don't know that I have the time to run the committee, but I will happily be on the committee and I will do as much as I possibly can. They appreciate that. Every single committee needs to have worker bees that are busy going and doing things, or people who just show up on the day of and can work the table. There is need. So just know that that's a likely possibility. I have been at the PTA meetings where they're like, who has the time to do this? And everybody sits there and looks at their shoes and they're like, oh, please don't let it be me. Please. I don't want to. And I would say to you that the one thing that I found worked for me was to be proactive about it and decide what I wanted to do beforehand, which leads to number 2. I do think it's absolutely critical that you volunteer for your child's school. Now, the PTA is going to have things that they want you to volunteer for, but I think it's important that you attempt to volunteer in your child's classroom. Now, in the beginning, they don't usually put you in your child's classroom. If you say that you want to volunteer, I'm going to tell you my experience, but I've heard this from a lot of other parents. I said, I'd like to volunteer in the classroom. And they said, fabulous, we're going to send you to the copy room and you'll make copies for the teacher. Now, I'm not in the classroom. I'm in the copy room. I learned so much in the copy room. I learned so very much in the copy room. You copy and you do a good job and you keep your ears open. And eventually they trust you enough. You show up when you're supposed to show up. You do what you're supposed to do. Obviously, that this has to work with everything else that you have going on in your life, right? But then eventually they will ask you to volunteer in the classroom. And I'll tell you, it's not easy. Sometimes volunteering in the classroom, and I think a good teacher sort of gauges like what your skill level is and puts you with something. But I know I got thrown into the deep end so many times where I was like, I don't know how to do this. And then you kind of have to figure it out. Do communicate with them and say, I'm not sure I know what to do. They'll help you to figure it out. Don't be afraid. But if you are in that classroom, first of all, the teacher's going to be on your side. Listen, I was a teacher for a lot of years, and a lot of people have a negative viewpoint about teachers. But teachers often have a little bit of a prejudice about parents who just drop their kids off. Look, school is a place where you're supposed to be able to drop your kid off, but the vast majority of the parents drop their kids off and that's it for them. The kids go and we're lucky if they come back and pick them up on time. There's always kids that have not been picked up on time. The teachers notice that. They absolutely notice that. And more than that, they notice the parents who are outside of that are always there to pick up their kid on time. Look, the morning thing is extra hard and you can't always do that, but be there to pick up your kid on time. They also notice when a parent is present at the PTA. They notice when a parent is there at assemblies to see their kid. They notice when the parent asks, can I participate? Can I be involved in the classroom? It may just be that you do holidays. And I think that's a good place to start, right? We have Valentine's Day coming up. It's a perfect time to ask anything other than if your child is going to junior high and changing classes and they're not in a central classroom. That's a little hard because they're really not doing but there might be a Valentine's Day dance. Volunteer. Oh, you will learn things. Not necessarily things you want to learn, but you'll learn things, right? But volunteer. Ask though, if it's anything younger than junior high or if it's a solidified class, ask, can I volunteer? Are you doing something for Valentine's Day? Can I help in any way? Great way to get in the door. We do this for so many reasons, right? We're putting that good stink on your child that you're a parent who cares, that you care about where your child is, and that you're willing to invest in more than just your child. I don't know why that's such a big deal, but it is to teachers. And it is to the principals and everybody down the line. You will see that your IEP will go differently if you volunteer at school. It just is a thing. It's just an equation, and I guarantee you it's a trick that works. So, and they will be much more willing to listen to everything else that I'm going to tell you to be conversing with them about if you are somebody who is putting your mouth where your mouth, where, all the things you're saying, your mouth where your money is what I wanted to say. And if you're physically willing to be there and help and support, it does make a difference. Now, for me, I went to the PTA meetings at my son's school. And it was being run by a woman that she was on like her fifth child and that she'd been the PTA president for pretty much forever. And she was really jaded. The chairs were not full. There weren't a lot of people who were there. And I came to the first meeting and wanted to help, but I saw that there was a little bit of an edge on it that they were like, well, parents just don't volunteer here. And I could see that if I did volunteer, they were going to put me in charge of stuff that I wasn't going to be good at, and I wasn't going to be as beneficial at. So I went up and said, hi, I'd like to volunteer. And I'd done a little bit of research, and I said, I have a master's degree in theater, and I'm a former teacher. So, is there a school play? whatever. And what I found out was that they, years before, they had done a show called Women in History during Women History Month, and that they always did it with the fourth graders. Now, my son was in kindergarten when I asked them about this. And the woman was like, well, you're not going to want to do that. It's a lot. It's a big thing. And I said, no, I got it. And then until for years, I mean, my son had already graduated from the school for like 2 or 3 years. I continued to do the production, and I would direct. I would go in the afternoon. I would cast the show, direct them, be there for the performances. And one year my son was in it when he was in fourth grade, but I did it for years before he was in fourth grade. And I did it years after he was in fourth grade. Now, it was fun for me. It was in my wheelhouse, so I didn't have to go learn something. It was great to connect with the teachers, with the kiddos, with the families. And I did it so that I could know what was going on in my son's school. The dividends, I remember the first day that I took my son to junior high, and I was terrified to leave him there. And one of the kiddos who, and his junior high was just a 2-year program. But, so his first day, was like, you're either the new person or you're the senior graduating at the school. Very odd dynamic, right? But there he was the newbie. And one of the students who had been in my shows with Women in History and played a big role, I remember his name was Adolphus. And Adolphus was walking by as I was dropping my son off. And Adolphus stopped and shook Jem's hand, and he was like, you're going to do great here. And he said to me, don't worry, Mrs. P, I got him. Right. And there were a bunch of people who knew my son because I had directed them in the play, and they did have him, and he had a very successful time at junior high. I never expected that to be the dividend, but it sure was. Plus, it was just an amazing experience for me to have that with all those kids. I still run into some of them in the grocery store, and kids remember when you invest in them and do something positive. So volunteer at your child's school. If you have a particular thing that you do, let's say you play the piano, volunteer to play the piano at the concerts with the music teacher. You don't have to run the bake sale. But if you're great at the bake sale, run the bake sale. But think about what would be a good investment in time with your talents. What would you enjoy doing? And see if you can wheedle that. A lot of times you can, and it's a very powerful thing. If maybe, this year you go and you watch and you see that there's an event that you particularly like, maybe the Halloween party or something, an activity that the school has. But chances are that the parent that is running that activity now, their kid is about to graduate from the program, and then they'll need somebody to take the place. So volunteer at the level that you can, but don't take the whole thing on. Don't become the PTA president until you have the rest of your life figured out, right? Usually there's somebody who really enjoys that, who's doing that. But be a sidekick. Help out in the way that you can. It will make a difference in your child's program. Let's go on to number 3. Okay. With the budgets the way they are, it's very rampant throughout the United States that teachers are having to buy their school supplies out of their own paycheck, and they don't get paid that much. Let's be really honest about that. But I have been a teacher in a classroom where my kids didn't have stuff, and it's that much harder to teach. So you do it because you care, and you do it because what else are you going to do? I had, in a classroom that I was in, we had no books. And it was horrifying to me. So I had to create a way, and I was Xeroxing stuff. I was at Kinko's over the weekend, making my kids books out of Xerox material, which I'm sure violated every copyright law under the sun. But my kids needed to learn. It was a requirement that they read and write. And, they didn't have books. A lot of classrooms, they don't have pencils. And I'll tell you, when, in some places, when your kids are going back to school, your teachers will make a list of here's what your child needs to have. And then they'll have an additional thing where they say, and here's what we like to have donated to the classroom. I love this. Not every place has this, But I say start at the open house. The first time you have an opportunity to meet your child's teacher, say, what kind of classroom donations do you prefer or like? Most of the places where my son was teaching, they would say, I can never have enough tissue. That the school just would give them like one little tiny box, not even, as big as this, for the year for 45 kids. And, it's cold and flu. Whoo! Benefit you, benefit your child, benefit the teacher if you donate. And, you go to a big box store like Costco or something like that, and you get like 12 boxes. It's only going to last them a month and a half. I'm telling you. You can't give them too much tissue. But maybe, the parents have already covered that in your class. This is why you ask. What would you like? What do you like donated to your classroom? I guarantee you ask that question and your stock goes up right that minute. And I keep calling it stink, but the happiness stink around your child, up, right? Because now the teacher goes, oh, this is a parent who gets it. And they sigh a little bit of a relief that they're not completely alone in this. Honestly, and they will talk about it in the staff lounge. Oh, I've got a parent who's so amazing. It gets talked about, you guys. So ask what they would like donated and do your best. Don't break your bank, right? To help them to get that. You can start small. If it's that you donate one box of Kleenex, they will appreciate that immensely. But one box of Kleenex at, the regular grocery store, sometimes it's like half of what it would be for 6 boxes at Costco. So if you can, get the bulk, because they're going to need it. Same thing with the pencils. And sometimes there's just a really weird ask, but, it's powerful to know, and it may be something that you can help fundraise towards. Now, I want to talk about Fullerton for just a minute. Because Fullerton is this amazing place in California. If you need to move to California or retire to California, I highly recommend Fullerton. It's adjacent to Disneyland. So it's, 10 minutes from Disneyland, but it's not in Disneyland proper. And it's a college town. And there are a group of people that are there that have created this organization called Fullerton Cares. Now, this was started by a dad who had a young child who had not yet had a diagnosis. And he was opening a restaurant, and he joined the Chamber of Commerce and said, I want to do something more. And so they created Fullerton Cares. And then shortly after that, his son was diagnosed with autism. But he and the group of people that he started Fullerton Cares with, it has grown so much, and they do all kinds of things. Now, there's so many things that are remarkable about Fullerton and Fullerton Cares. But above all is the relationship between the parents and the schools. Amazing. I have said to them, you need to do an instruction manual for everyone around the country to do this, because they don't have fights at their IEPs. They don't have huge, big discrepancies. They don't have parents who are losing their hair over, am I going to get the classroom that I need? And are they going to listen to the goals that I think are appropriate? They don't have any of that happening there, because the parents get together in Fullerton Cares and they say to the schools, what do you guys need? What do you need to be successful? And sometimes the teacher will say something like, what I really need is a digital camera. We're working on a project this year, and what I need is a digital camera. Well, Fullerton Cares does things throughout the year that are fundraisers, and they take that money and they donate it. And so all of the teachers have wish lists, and the wish lists get met. There's no teacher in Fullerton that's having to pay for pencils or Kleenex. Doesn't happen. So that stress is off the table. And they all know that's coming from a group of parents who have special needs kids. So when they sit down to an IEP, it's people meeting to talk about what's best for an individual. And all the other BS is taken care of. So maybe you can't right now, today, do what Fullerton has done, but you can do it in a microcosm. Ask your teacher, what do you need? And try to donate that. If it's something big, pair with other people, right? Who knows? Maybe in the end, you make something that's like Fullerton Cares. By the way, they have businesses that are involved. Like, there are dentists and there's bankers, and the whole community gets behind Fullerton Cares. They have events. I'm hoping this year again, they haven't for the last couple of years because of COVID. They have a Mardi Gras for autism. And we used to go to it every year. It's a great, great event. If you're in California, I don't know. I have to reach out to them and see if they're doing it this year. I know last year they were sort of on the fence, and then they decided to wait one more year. I hope they're doing it this year. And it's a big fundraiser. They have games and things, and everybody in the community comes out. It's not just the special needs community. And the kids play, and they buy tickets, and all of that money goes to Fullerton Cares to help support the schools. It's a brilliant, brilliant thing to do. You can do it on your own in a very small way, and then see if it flourishes into something big. Okay, number 4, ask how the teacher would like to communicate with you. You need a communication log or something that goes back and forth, perhaps not every day, but certainly every week. You need a way to be able to communicate with the teacher and to have the teacher communicate with you. So ask, what is their preferred method of communication? Now, I would love it if this went the other way. If teachers always would say to you, as a parent, how would you like for me to communicate with you? But consider this, how many kids are in the classroom? And if there's 20 of them, that's a whole lot of people to communicate with on a regular basis. And if they all have a different method of communication, it's going to get a little complicated. And how much time do we want the teacher to spend on preparing and teaching our children? And how much time do we want for them to spend on communicating with us? It's important that they communicate with us, but I don't want it to be half of their time. This is why we ask them, how would you prefer to communicate? Now, we live in the age of communication, right? I have been with so many different teachers who have so many different methods, and I really don't care as long as there is a method and I know how to use it and how to rely upon it. So you may feel differently, but I think it's at least worthwhile to ask the teacher, how would you like to communicate with me? It's positive assumptive. It assumes that the teacher wants to communicate with you, which I think is half the battle, right? There are some teachers who don't want to communicate at all, but they know they have to. There are things that schools subscribe to that are apps where you get a message about, there were years that I would know exactly what my son's homework was, and other years when I wouldn't, right? But I always would ask, how would you like for me to communicate with you? There are teachers who will say, you can communicate with me, or I'm going to send home a note. But everybody has an opinion. Ask what it is, because if you're doing it their way, you're much more likely to get more communication. And that's my whole reason for that. And you need to know what's going on in the classroom, which is also why you volunteer, because then you get eyes on. But critical to know and to build that trust with the teacher that you want to hear what's going on in the classroom. Not everybody does, so make sure that your teacher does know that you want to. All right, number 5. We are going to communicate our expectations. Now, this one's a little bit dicey, and it isn't necessarily something that you want to beat your teacher over the head with on the first day. But I think it's reasonable if you have a child going into a classroom who has an IEP or a 504 plan, that you have some sort of a meeting in the fall to get to know the whole team. And if they don't feel that that's reasonable, for me, that's a warning sign, right? But I think when you go to that meeting, you need to bring treats. You can ask, what are the big to-do? I know here in Los Angeles, everybody's gaga over Portos. Well, it's a lot of gluten, so I don't know from it. But, I see you bring Portos and people go, oh, they brought Portos, right? You got to stand in line for a while. It's not even expensive, but everybody's all about the Portos. And coffee, or there was one school that my son was at that they were all about tea. So, I would bring an assortment of teas for them to be able to enjoy. Bring a treat. They will act all funny about it, because they're not allowed to enjoy whatever you brought during the meeting. And I would always make a big deal about, I know you're not supposed to, but I'm waiving that. They still wouldn't, but they would grab it afterwards like they were starved people. and they appreciated it, right? But I would also at those meetings communicate my expectations. Sometimes that was a list of things that were important to me as a parent. For instance, I would say things like, I want you to know that my expectation is that my son will do absolutely all of his homework. And my hope is that he will get that turned in on time for full credit. But I will oversee that part of it, and that is critical and important to me. Anything you assign that goes home, I'm in charge of, and I will do if I know what it is, I will do my level best to make sure that that is done and on time. But once he gets to you, I am not physically there for him to turn it into you for you to get it. So if you don't get it, I need to know. And I don't need to know 5 weeks from now. I need to know today. Because you have a policy that says you'll accept late work, but every day after it loses points. But if I don't know, then he's not going to get any points. And there were times when in his IEP it was written in that late things were waived, then he got more time, and eventually that was completely gone. But I said, don't expect me to be a mind reader. I need to know if something doesn't get turned in. Now, this is not how every teacher runs things, because sometimes teachers take paperwork and they don't get around to grading it or checking it off for a month. Oh my gosh, those teachers drive me crazy, because then it's too late. But to that teacher, I would say, that's fine if that's how you do things. But when you discover a month from now that he didn't turn in, then that's when the clock starts ticking. The minute you tell me that the work is missing is when the late clock starts. And it doesn't start a second before that. I let them know my expectation was he is going to do all of the work. And I want him to get credit for it. Just let me know. That's just one of many different things. And I would be very clear. Because there are some parents who are like, well, that's homework and that's silly and it's of no use. For me, that was a line in the sand. Now, sometimes it was silly homework, but it didn't matter. The teacher assigned it. We're going to do it. Right? There were many things that were like that I would very clearly communicate what it was that we were trying to do. I would tell them he's going to college. I told them he's going to apply to a lot of schools, including Harvard. So we're not here to get our ticket stamped. He's here to learn what you have to teach. We're going to do it all. And we expect good grades, because there are parents, and listen, I have no problem with this. There are parents who are like, a C is fine. I was not that parent. I was like, we're going to college and we want a good grade point average. So communicate what your expectations are. All right. Number 6. Yeah, we are going to offer successful strategies for our children. And then in parentheses, when asked. I think this is a dicey one too. But if you're getting a note home ever that says, we had a problem today at school, your child did this. I think there's a whole set of things that I, as a parent, want to do. Like the first thing I want to do is say, well, what happened before? And then I try to sit and be still and listen, because you learn a lot about what they know and what they don't know. And a lot of times they don't know what happened before. That's not a good sign. But it's not always possible to know, to be fair. But if they do know, that's a good sign. But then I don't want to just let it go. I want to say to them, okay, so what, this is what happened before. I want to know what the consequence is. And then I want to say to them, so what do you think the strategy is? What are you thinking about doing so that we don't see this again? And it's very interesting because it's the rare teacher who's got any kind of behavioral training, which is scary, right? And I don't want to flog them, and especially until they realize that I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. I don't want to come off like I think I'm an expert on anything, right? So I want to ask their opinion. What do you think? And then I listen to that. I actively listen to that because sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's crap, right? But then I will say something to them like, my son's doing ABA with a really good company, and we have seen this behavior at home, and here's what they've told me to do. I don't know if that's possible for you. I don't know if you're interested in that. Would you like to know what it is what works at home? Or sometimes I would say, we're working with a really good expert, and we see that, at the center, this behavior has stopped. Would you at all be interested in having a conversation with his BCBA at his ABA to talk with them about what works? Would that be of interest to you? And what you'll find is that there will be some teachers who are like, yes, please. I would like to, because not only will it help them with your child, but it will help them with everybody. And good teachers are people who like learning. Now, some of them are afraid of learning something because what is it going to cost them? Is the school going to be mad at them? I don't love these teachers, but we got to work with them some of the time. So if you're saying, hey, can I tell you what worked at home? And they're like, no, because it's totally different at school. Then you got to slow your roll a little bit. But that's when I would ask for an emergency IEP meeting. And then at that meeting, same thing. I would say, I would like to hear from the team. What do you think the strategy is going to be going forward? And if you think that their strategy is feasible, run it by your BCBA and let them try it. But ask for a check-in in 2 weeks. Is that working? And if it's not, then say, would you be interested in knowing what we do at home for this? Would you be interested in knowing what they do at the center for it? Would you be interested in talking to our autism expert about this behavior and having them come in and consult? I'm losing my microphone. They can only say no. And, you can ask more than one time. But if they get desperate enough, it is their job that they are supposed to find strategies that work. And if they've tried 2 or 3 that haven't, they will be more likely to listen. But it is, you kind of have to gauge it. Okay, number 7, because we're running out of time here. Share resources. So my son, when he was in high school, he went, I don't even remember what the class was, but he went to take this class, and always before, we had it written into his IEP that he could take notes on a computer. And that anything, including a worksheet, if they gave him a worksheet, he could take, and let's say, it's question number 1, he could type it on the computer, put 1, and just put the corresponding answer. Made it hard for the teacher, but they got over it. Because his handwriting wasn't great, and it took him so much longer to handwrite, he was missing things. So we get into this one class, and she's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Now, I know what the rules are, and it's written into his IEP, and I know that I can force her and say, too bad, so sad, get over yourself. But rather than do that, I said to her, I'm sure that there's a reason why you're stipulating that he has to take all of his notes in handwriting. And she knew that it was in his IEP, and she goes, well, I've got this great study that shows that when you handwrite things, it goes into your brain in a different way, it processes differently and whatever. Great study, by the way, and I loved reading and it was wonderful. And I said, this is fantastic. Can I share another study with you? And I sent this article over to her about handwriting with autism and the realities of that for a person with autism, processing to going to the hand, and that they lift up their pencil and it takes them twice as long. And that at the end, they get half the notes taken of other kiddos. So I said, I just want you to know why I'm taking the stance that I am. Now, she was a good teacher. She read that and she said, oh my God, I had no idea. I don't know what to do now. And I said, I think it would be great if we could make a compromise. And she said, what are you thinking of? We're collaborating now. And I said, I don't have a problem with him writing the notes. I just don't want him to be penalized when he goes to study that he doesn't have all the notes of everybody else. You have all the notes written down because I'd already seen her planner. And I said, I would be willing to have him have to handwrite everything in class if he can have your notes to study. And she said, that's a great idea. And she gave him all of her notes, but she graded him on, he had to be making the effort in class to take the notes. Now, two things were accomplished here. He got more practice writing, which was good for him, right? I wanted him to be writing, but I didn't want him to be penalized when it came to studying, so he wasn't. And we both, because we shared resources, we were able to meet in the middle and have something really powerful. We got straight A's in that class. It was fabulous. And the teacher and I learned about how to collaborate. Now, you have resources that you know and that you can share. It's really critical that you don't overshare, right? And if they share with you, make sure that you read what they send to you. But don't withhold resources either. Share them when appropriate and good things will happen. Hey, Eric, I'm so glad. And Eric says, oh, you should come to my IEP meeting. I need you for backup. It's so bad we're moving districts. They put more emphasis on sports than kids. I live in Oklahoma. Oh, Eric, I'm so sorry. And I know it's funny because I was talking about this with somebody the other day. When my son was in second grade, I started to panic and not be able to sleep at night because I was like, where's he going to go to high school? And everybody was like, he's in second grade. Why are you stressing about that? And it was very clear to me. I was like, I got to have a plan. That's the kind of person I am. I got to have a plan. So rather than just keep not sleeping, I started looking around. And one of the things that was on my list was I was looking for a high school that wasn't sports driven, that didn't have a football team, that wasn't going to be all about that. I had taught at a school that had a football team. And I've talked about this before. I was pregnant at the time with Jem, and I was out in the courtyard walking from the main building out to my classroom, and all the kids are supposed to be in class during this time. It's my free period. But there was a student, and he was a large student. Later on, I found out on the football team, there was a girl who was walking by, and he was walking past her, and for no reason, no words were spoken. I was close to both of them. He just leaned over and punched her in the hip so hard that it took her off the path and she couldn't walk for a minute. And I was so stunned. I've never seen somebody just do something just that mean, right? And she was terrified, and I kind of lost myself for a minute. I was 5 months pregnant, but I was a teacher, and I went, hey, and I walked up to him and I said, what on earth? Why would you do that? Come with me to the principal office. And he got up in my face and he said, do you know who I am? He goes, I don't know who you are, but you don't know who you're talking to, and I'm not going anywhere with you. And he started swear words and stuff. And I was nose to nose, not quite belly to belly, because I was 5 months pregnant at that point. And the security guard, who knew me really well at this school, came running. Somebody said, Mrs. P's on the courtyard with this student, help. And he came running and physically got between us and, separated it, because we were, nose to nose. And I, filled out a whole report, and, he threw a fit in the principal's office. A police car had to come and take him away because he was threatening me and everybody else. And they took him away. And then it wasn't the principal, it was the associate dean, sat me down and said, what are you thinking? You're a pregnant woman, and this is not a kid that you mess with, and whatever. And I expected him to be expelled. He was on the football team, and he played in the football game the next day. And when I complained about it, they said, you don't understand this school and football, and we'll work with him, but you can't take him away from the football team, and you can't take football away from him. And I was like, which has led him to believe that you can just punch a girl and get away with it. And that for me solidified, I don't want to be at a school where sports are the thing, because it's tied to funding. And I didn't want to be a part of that. And I didn't want my son to be a part of that. And I didn't want him to be bullied by, and not all football teams are that way, and not all high schools are that way. I don't want to be a part of it. So I started looking and I found the school. I found the school that he went to for high school, which was a college prep high school, and they didn't have a single sports team. They did sports activities, during their PE time, but they had a robotics team. That was the team. And they competed for the robotics team, which is a different level. And the robotics team had like 5 different divisions that you could be marketing, whatever. I think, and you're in 3rd grade, I encourage you, start looking now. The schools are out there. And it wasn't easy to get my son into that school, but we got it to work. Yeah, Eric says that's awful. And I believe it. It happens way too often here. Unfortunately, all schools have sports here. We're so worried. Take a look, because you might have a charter school. And I have seen parents start a school. That's a little bit more than what you really want to do, but I have seen parents do that. And I've seen parents take their kids out and do homeschooling. We're hoping to have Kobe Bird on the show in February. And I know Kobe was bullied so badly in school that there was no choice. And his mom says, and Kobe says, not that anybody would wish for what happened to him, but there was no choice. It was clear he was not going to school, that he was going to be homeschooled. And oh, what a successful outcome that was, So you will find your way. You will find your way. But I agree, the sports thing, there's a mentality, and I get it, that being on a team is a critical skill to teach kids. And rooting for a team, critical. That's why I like the robotics thing. Totally, totally different. And I encourage you all to look for a robotics program. They start in kindergarten, and they're in schools and they're in libraries. Look for a robotics program. It's a really good thing. But I'm sorry you're having a tough time, and I'm proud of you that you're deciding to look elsewhere right now, because sometimes with a school, the school won't collaborate with you. Sometimes it's better to just say, then we're moving. I stayed when our landlord died, and he had not been paying his mortgage, so we were evicted because of that, even though we were paying our rent out of our apartment. And I was having trouble finding an apartment in the district where we were, and I was moving heaven and earth to stay because I was someplace where I had made inroads and we were working collaboratively. It's hard. It's really hard what you're willing to do for your kiddos, for them to be at the right school. I have a great faith, though, Eric, that you're going to figure it out. And when you do, it will be powerful. Let's go on to number 8. So ask how you can be the best support. I had a parent the other day ask me if I thought they would be allowed in the classroom to be their child's aide. I think that's a really extreme circumstance, but I've seen schools agree to it. I have seen schools say, we need you to be on campus and be here and drop in once a day into the child's classroom. But if you ask the question, it's interesting what you will hear back. And you will also notice that if you ask the question, how can I be the best support to what you're trying to do here at this school, not just with my child, but also with my child, that it's kind of stunning, their response, because they're not used to being asked that question. I think it's a worthwhile question. Number 9, praise anything good. Oh my goodness. This is so critical, that if you think about who are the people who work at schools, I don't know anyone who has ever gotten into teaching or working in a school going, oh, that's some real money. I'm going to be successful doing that, and I'm going to, get rich doing that. I don't know anybody ever who thought that. You wouldn't do that. If you wanted to be rich, you would not be a teacher or work in a school. Even if you look at what principals make compared to what people with that much schooling make, it's crazy, the disparity. So you got to know that they're not there. Yes. Have I met people who went into teaching because they're like, I want summers off? I have met those people, right? But they don't last long. They might last 1 or 2 years before they go, oh, this is some hard work, right? If you are not gratified by teaching people, you don't make it for the long haul. I will say that some of those people go very quickly from being teachers to being administrators. right? But for the most part, anybody who's a teacher and been teaching for more than 2 years, they are there in that classroom because they have a passion for teaching. And I'll tell you what they appreciate more than anything else is praise, because it can be a thankless job. So anything that you see that's good, and I mean this with the administrators too. You see an administrator who's done something good, oh, you pile on that praise. You say thank you. You tell them how much it's appreciated. And you will see them preen like peacocks because they love it. They absolutely love it. So take the time, praise them for a job well done. I would especially do this during IEP meetings. You guys know I would go into an IEP meeting and I come in with a letter that's ready. And in the letter, one of the first things I do is I do all the praise. I say, I want to thank Mrs. Williams for her amazing support. This has been wonderful. And I read it right off the letter, right? And what's funny is, you got a room full of people and, you thank 3 of them and say how superlative they are. And everybody's like, oh, am I next? And then you don't say them because they didn't earn the praise. And you see people going, oh, well, she praises people and publicly when how come I didn't get the praise? And they work a little harder, right? It's not a bad thing. Rather than calling somebody out and saying, and you have not been helpful and supportive. No. You heap the praise on the people who were and show them that's what I will praise. It is amazing how things work when you praise anything that's good. So I encourage you to do that. And that leads us to number 10. And this is my stealth bomb. This is the one I wish I could take credit for and say, I invented this. I did not. I don't remember who it was who suggested this to me, but it is the single most powerful gift I can give you. And that is to write thank you notes and recommendation letters. So at the end of the school year, but if you need it, you can do it before the end of the school year, but certainly at the end of the school year, rather than give a gift, rather than give a gift card, rather than give, bath salts or whatever, the gift that I started giving and always have given since is for somebody who has been wonderful. If somebody's been okay, I write a nice little note, right? And say, thank you for having my son in your classroom. We appreciated your time and energy, right? Very nondescript, but I thank you note, right? But if somebody has done really good work, and boy, I've been so lucky to have, and the more of these I wrote, the more of them I got, let's be honest. I write a letter of recommendation and I say, to whom it may concern, my son was in, Mr. Phelps' class this year and Mr. Phelps was amazing and blah, 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 blah. And, my child is on the spectrum and, I was so amazed by this, that, whatever. And then I sign it and I give my phone number and say, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. It's a letter of recommendation. And I give that to them with a note that says, I have also given a copy of this letter to your principal and asked for it to be made a part of your permanent file. Oh, currency. I have had teachers say to me, do you know I got a promotion because you wrote that letter? This is some serious business. A promotion that is substantially much more money than the $5 Starbucks card or the $10 Starbucks card, right? This is literal currency that helps them in their career to do the things that they want to do. And it's a thank you. And it's calling them out and saying, you're absolutely amazing. My son's 9th grade English teacher, and I wish I could remember what his name is because I would say it right now, but I'm having one of those moments. But he changed my son's life. My son went into his class and we knew my son had done a little bit of poetry in 6th grade and he'd done some more writing in 7th and 8th grade, but we were like, we don't know what that is, that he could suddenly write a little bit. But we went to the open house and this teacher, he was a playwright and he said, here's the thing. I want them to learn grammar and I want them to learn all the mechanics, but that stuff is all over here. And then there's just being able to write your ideas and say what your viewpoint is. And that's front and center for me. So he would say, my policy is that they can do as many rewrites as they need to get an A. They can absolutely get an A in my class if they just keep doing the rewrites. But I want them to verbally vomit on the page and get something on the page. And then once they have the idea, then we can go, then in the rewrites, they can fix the commas and the periods and all the other stuff. But let's get them expressing themselves on the page. That gave my son permission to write. And as I've said before, my son tells me all the time, he says, Mom, I'm a writer in my soul. I got something to say, and it's different than what other people have to say. Man, can you imagine if we never got to that? I could just weep. But that teacher allowed him the space. He didn't give him a pass on the comments, but he said, we'll do that later. Write what you want to write, and then we'll catch up with all the grammar and the whatever. Just amazing. Just amazing. So the letter that I wrote him, and he said to me, he said, that's the letter of a lifetime. And I said, that's what I meant it to be. And, a very, very important thing to do for people. Here's the other thing. You write those letter of recommendations and it gets out. Oh, you don't think they talk about that in the staff room? Oh, they certainly do. And I know when I started doing this, my son was, I think it was when he left second grade. And I always say to go to the open house at the end of the year, the back to school night where they show all the projects they've been working on. Go to the first session for your child, wax poetic over your child and their teacher. But for the second one, because they always have a second session for people who have more than one kid, go to the next grade level up and meet all the teachers. And you can tell they've already talked in the staff room about you and your kid. And I remember going, there was one teacher that they were talking about that they really, really, really wanted Jem to go to her classroom. And I went and I met her. And I remember sticking my hand out to meet her. And I said, hi, I'm Jem's mom. And she was like, yeah, hi. And I went, oh, she's not thrilled about him being in the classroom. She sees me as a bunch of work and him as a bunch of work. This is never going to work. But so then I went and paid really good attention in the other classrooms and found the teacher. So that when we went to the next IEP meeting, and I was like, yeah, I don't think that one teacher, I don't think that's going to work out. I'll tell you who I would really love to see him with. And of course, they won't let you request a teacher. But if you're somebody who's putting pressure in there and volunteering, I said, I'll tell you, I think it's going to be a good match. I wish you would talk to so-and-so about him being in her classroom. And they were like, really? And I said, yeah, I think that would be a good match. I think she and I would be a good match. I think he would be a good match. And then suddenly he was in her classroom. You know what I'm saying? But that teacher had shared with me at one point, she was like, I saw that letter you wrote and she was like, I love somebody who appreciates what I'm doing in the classroom. She was going to do everything during that year because she was looking forward to the letter. She was expecting a letter, wanted a letter, and boy, she got a letter. You know what I'm saying? So it's powerful. It's free. Took a little time to sit and write a letter, but it's powerful. They talk about it. And the good teachers get in line and go, oh, I want to be a part of that. I like working for somebody who appreciates me. And I know I'm a good teacher. So you're in the right group of people and they will talk about it. So these are my 10 tips. This is how we work towards collaboration. I always say, think, what would Fullerton Cares do? Do that because they have a great relationship with their teachers and with their school. Powerful, powerful stuff. I didn't put on the list, but the other thing that if I was going to do a number 11, it would be to know what golden time is at your school. Does everybody know what golden time is? Schools are federally funded. Right now, today, we'll see what happens. But right now they're federally funded, and it means that there is a time of day, and it's different for different schools. At my son's school, it was 10:30. If my child was in a chair in his school at 10:30, it doesn't matter if we pulled up at 10:28 and he ran and he got in the chair. If he was in his chair at 10:30, they got funding for him for the day. Woohoo! The school gets money to educate him, which they put into a fund and they are paying their bills with, right? If my son was not there at 10:30, let's say I brought him at 9 o'clock, but I pulled him out at 10:15 and he's not in the chair, they don't get any money for the day. What's worse, if I bring him at 11:30 or at 10:32, we're 2 minutes late, and they educate him all day long, they don't get paid for that. They get no money for him for the day. That's horrible. Part of why schools are like, your child needs to be here. They don't hit you over the head with the golden time thing, right? Because then it makes it all about the money thing. But for us, for our community, we're going to have to pull our kids out from time to time for different things. Know what golden time is. Try to work with it. Sometimes you can't, right? But if it's possible that you can make the dentist appointments for 2 o'clock and not at 10:15, do it. Do it. Nobody expects your child to get educated for absolutely free and get no credit, right? From, that allows them to have funding. So know what golden time is, be respectful of it, and you will find that things go easier. Well, that's all the time we have for today. But I hope that something resonated with you, because we can have positive, collaborative relationships with our schools. When you see that everything fails, it is the time to look at another school. You can sue. And I listen, I believe it's worthwhile to push schools legally to give you what they're entitled to. But sometimes when they make it absolutely clear that they're not going to see your child as an individual, it's better to put your time and energy into a different school. It's true. I know it's like letting them get away with it, but you can't. It's the whole thing about don't fight a land war in Asia. You have enough to deal with. It doesn't have to be your responsibility to change the school's mind. Somebody sometime will sue them 68 ways from Sunday, and they will have to rethink what they do. That doesn't have to be you. Prioritize for yourself what's important for your child and do what you can. Accept the things you cannot change and have the courage to change the things you can and the wisdom to know the difference, right? So that's our focus. Hey, on Wednesday, I have to be honest with you, tomorrow we don't have Dr. Doreen. So we're back on Wednesday with the amazing Dr. Thea Pham. She is a neuroscientist, very knowledgeable about the brain and about the way that the brain works, both in the typical brain and in the neurodivergent brain. And she's got some critical, important information for us about how our kids learn, because their brain actually is different from ours. And so if you've ever wondered, like, what is the difference and what does this mean and how can we really utilize this information to help our child learn as much as possible, Wednesday is the day. Dr. Thea Pham will be with us, and she's powerful. So I can't wait to share her message with us. So that will be on Wednesday, my friends. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.